I have three reasons why I personally do not believe that Tim Walz is qualified to be the vice president of the United States. You guys know I'm voting Trump Vance. Straightforward. I think it's not a difficult decision for me, but there's probably undecided people out there still who watch or listen. And certainly there's people who love Joe Biden that are watching right now. There's people who love Kamala Harris that are watching right now. You do you. I'm voting Trump Vance. There are three reasons why I think my own personal belief is that Tim Walz is not qualified to be the next vice president. One, he failed on BLM. He allowed Minneapolis to burn. I believe the dollar figure is $500 million in damages when all he had to do was call out the state guard, and they could have put down all of the rioting, all of the looting, all of the arson. The Minneapolis police precinct wouldn't have burned to the ground. So many different businesses owned by white, black, Asian, and Hispanic people in Minneapolis would not have been targeted and destroyed. He would have been able to enforce the law. He failed. He had a decision to make, and he decided to let anarchy and crime triumph over law and order. For that reason, number one for me, he failed when it came to protecting everyone in Minneapolis from the hooligans that rioted, looted, and pillaged in Minneapolis. That's number one for me. Second reason is he failed on COVID. And there are a lot of blue state governors that failed on COVID. Virtually all of them did. But he set up a snitch line to allow Minnesotans to be able to turn in each other if they found that there was a violation of COVID policy. And I think I've told this story before, but this is why when he shows up in Philadelphia and he says, we've got a rule in Minnesota, it's mind your own damn business. I'm like, wait a minute. That was the exact opposite of the COVID snitch line that you put in place that had neighbors telling on neighbors. And I've told this story before. I think I've told it on this show. In the fall of 2020, I don't remember the exact date. You can look up the date if you would, Adam. When Alabama and LSU played, I believe it was in October of 2020, shortly before the 2020 election. I went out to go watch Alabama and LSU play at a local Nashville sports bar. And at that local Nashville sports bar, they were requiring in Nashville in the fall of 2020, it had to close at like 10 p.m. And so I was out there. Tommy Lahren, who now works at OutKick, was there. She was not an OutKick employee at the time. The members of the band Lit, who are my own worst enemy. A lot of you will know that song. That's the theme song now of Clay and Buck. That's how we ended up picking it. I know those guys. They are fantastic. By the way, that game was played, December 5th of 2020. Is that right, Adam? Because they pushed back all of the start date that season, so everything was played later. Was that the final game of the regular season that year in the SEC? It may well have been. So it was even later than I thought. December 5th of 2020. The Popoff brothers, who are of the band Lit, bar is closing at like 10 p.m. as required by the authorities of Nashville. This wasn't just blue states. If you had a blue city, you had to deal with this. So the Popoff brothers say, hey, why don't you guys, everybody here who's watching games and having drinks in a crowded bar, they got Alabama LSU up on the Jumbotron. They said, why don't you guys just come back to our house? We'll put on some of the other games that are still going on that day, and you can have beers. And I don't know, there's probably 15 or 20 people that said, hey, that's cool, hopped in Ubers and got driven to East Nashville. Went in East Nashville into the house, hanging out there, having a great time. If you wanted to be outside by a fire pit, they've got they had a nice house in East Nashville. For those of you who don't know, East Nashville is just across the bridge from downtown Nashville. close to where the Titans Stadium is, if you've ever been to Nashville. That's the east bank of the Cumberland River. That is East Nashville, for those of you who don't know. That, by the way, was the second to last regular season game. They also played a game on December 12th. It was a crazy year, 2020. And so we're in the house hanging out. There's 15 or 20 of us. It is not a wild party. You wouldn't know that many people were at the house because almost everybody arrived in Uber. Knock on the door. The police have been called because the Popoff brothers are violating COVID number of people that can be at your house regulations in the city of Nashville. They arrested and charged with a crime the Popoff brother who was hosting that party. Tommy and I are in the house. There's probably, like I said, 15 or 20 people there. Get in the car, drive back to Williamson County where I am, get in an Uber. I've got another couple of buddies there with me. And he was charged with a crime. The crime was in Nashville, Tennessee, in December of 2020, having too many people in his house to violate COVID restrictions. He was turned in by his neighbor for having a small party, a group of people over to watch college football games and drink beer in December of 2020. That happened. I think he pled guilty to a misdemeanor and had to do community service. I think he has shared the full story. I don't know that I've talked about that a great deal, but that happened in 2020, even in a full-on red state like Tennessee. People in Nashville had gone crazy. The second reason why I cannot support Tim Walz is because he made that the standard law of the land in Minnesota. He had neighbors turning on neighbors, turning you in because you had the gall to go hang out with your friends and have a beer and watch a college football game. Number two reason I cannot support him. Third reason, he has said and passed laws and signed them and supported them that if you are a minor, he believes you should be able to get your genitals removed. You should be able to get your boobs chopped off. He has defended so-called gender-affirming care as a normal and positive thing that occurs in the state of Minnesota. He's even gone so far as to say, if you are a parent and you will not allow your kid, who is a minor, to have gender-changing surgery, your parental rights can be challenged. And he has also put tampons in boys' bathrooms all throughout the state of Minnesota. This is all craziness. These are three reasons why I'm not willing to support him. Now, I'd encourage you to go watch it. I've never served in the military. I don't have, as a result, a super strong opinion about Tim Walz bailing on his unit when they were deployed to Iraq. But we had Sean Parnell on. Sean Parnell is a part of the Clay and Buck Podcast Network. He spent over 450 days in combat service. That is when other people could have killed him. He has been shot at a lot of times. He has commanded soldiers who have been shot at a lot. I want to defer to people like him who have actually served in a time of war, in a place of danger. We had him on today, and he said that Walz leaving his unit and refusing to deploy with them was cowardice, and that it was stolen valor for him to be claiming that because he was in the reserves, that when push came to shove, he bailed on his unit. Now, that is not one of the three things that I would point out. Failure in Minneapolis with BLM, COVID failure, and the trans ridiculousness as it pertains to kids under 18 being treated, those are all disqualifying to me. But for many out there who fought and served, Walz bailing on his unit when they deployed and deciding to run for Congress instead is indefensible and an attack that many in the military believe is disqualifying of a choice. So I would encourage you to go listen to Sean Parnell. I will defer to people who have actually been fired at, to people who have served overseas when others were trying to kill them, about what that would do to unit morale for you to be in a leadership position as a sergeant and decide that you weren't willing to make the trip to Iraq to defend your country, but instead we're going to bail on that and then run for Congress. Tim Walz lied about carrying a gun in combat. He appears to have lied when he called himself an Operation Enduring Freedom veteran when he held a placard outside of a George W. Bush rally. It appears that he is guilty of stolen valor. That is, claiming to have done things in his military service that he did not do. I never served. I've never been in the military. I'm not an expert on this, so I have tended to allow others to weigh in on this. Yesterday, Sean Parnell was on our show. I just shared and have shared several different veteran commentaries on this. It appears to be a major issue for veterans across the political spectrum that Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, would choose to abandon his team, his regiment, his group of officers, his group of soldiers, when he was scheduled to lead them to Iraq. And he decided instead to run for Congress. Once he knew that he was going to have to serve in a combat setting, potentially in a dangerous manner, he decided to cut and run. Sean Parnell called that cowardice. Pete Hegseth at Fox News has called that cowardice. Both of those guys have served in combat situations, been under fire. And I think that there are a lot of military veterans who have served in combat roles that also feel like Tim Walz is guilty of lying about his combat service. And again, stolen valor, as it is called. I do not think this story is going to go away. I think that Walz has at best lied. At worst, I think that he has committed potentially a crime in lying about what his role in the military actually was. And I don't think this story is going to go away. I think it's going to linger. And I think it's evidence of Kamala Harris's team not having done that great of a job of actually doing a breakdown of what the data reflected in their background check. Now, maybe they have actually kind of run through so much of this that there has not been a sort of major vetting. Possibly there was a inability to actually do the due diligence on a case like this because they were scrambling. Maybe Kamala Harris's team doesn't have military veterans on their vetting team. It seems like a huge unforced error to have made this decision and to have failed like this, as it appears they have.